Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Let's just wait for a few minutes before we get started. We'll give it 1 or 2 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first Transifex Native webinar. My name is Panos, and I will be your host today. Let me introduce you to our speakers. So Mike is our senior product manager here at Transifex, and Dimitrios is our engineering manager. The focus for today will be, of course, Transifex Native, our newly launched end-to-end cloud-native localization stack. Please take a moment to familiarize yourself with our webinar logistics, and please do feel free to ask any questions you might have using the chat functionality. Your questions will be addressed after the live presentations and during the Q&A session, and which we hope to make it as more interactive as possible. Moving on with the agenda, Mike will talk about the current localization challenges and the issues with the workflows as of now, but he will also introduce us on how Transifex is reimagining localization with the development of Transifex Native. On the other hand, Dimitrios will show us how Transifex Native works in practice and what are its main functionalities. So thank you again for being here with us today. Sit back and relax. And Mike, the ball to you.
So, hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Together, we will talk mainly about this topic, this problem that localization currently has, which is how content is just extracted and localized and then fed back to the applications. Okay, so I had prepared a metaphor here using the background with containers, but I can skip that. Okay, it's not that useful. And I can jump right to the current localization flow and how most of us currently do work on localization. And one thing that I wanted to note here is that the example showcased here is the most generic one, containing as much items as possible. So there might be other localization workflows that involve less items than the one shown here. I took this example that feels more relatable and more complex to what we know, which reflects to a product application localization that has the steps that we can see here. And it goes like this. Usually there is we have an application that our users and our customers see. And this application is related with a repository. That is, the repository is a place where engineers to work and develop new features, enhancements, and bug fixes for the application in order to share the application. When localization enters this flow, some additional steps need to be added, which are the 3 steps that are shown here, in order for the application to communicate with the translation management system and get content localized. So the first step added here is the API step, where content from the code, from the repository, needs to be transferred to the TMS in order to be translated. This could be a pure API or a connector, an integration that can be used to transfer content to TMS and back. An example of an integration might be Zendesk or WordPress. Usually in this step, what is required is that a script needs to be developed to handle some business logic that has to do with localization and how content is moved from the code to the TMS and back. After that, we of course have the resource files, which are files that are holding localization, and these files have content in a structured way that the application code can consume, and also the TMS can recognize. And finally, we have the translation management system, where the localization flow, the actual localization takes place. All this functionality, of course, moves back and forth. And one characteristic that is relevant to modern how we all work is that this flow is not a one-way trip. you don't go one way to TMS and then back and that's it. It usually is a continuous flow. So updates happen more than once a day, more than 1 times, and these updates needs to be localized as part of the other development flow as well. That's why I have added here continuous integration, continuous delivery, the well-known CI/CD flow that most of us are using. The problem starts right there, and the first problem that we have identified in this flow is happening on the repository. Usually in the repository, engineers work in parallel on different features or enhancements or bugs, and either introduce new content that needs to be localized, or they change content that is already there. Okay, and how can this content be synced between different features, even while engineers keep working on it? How any conflicts will be resolved when we need to pack everything up and wrap it and feed it to the application? That's the first point that we have identified as problematic. Moving on, we have the API. On this stage, some scripts need to be created to consume and communicate logic to and from the TMS. Okay, what happens when this logic needs to change or be enhanced? What if we miss the spot? Well, all in all, this introduces some maintenance, which of course is time, and time is money. And last but not least, we have the resource files. Resource files hold content, and as we all know, resource files holds content that has a variety of completion states. You might have a resource file in one language that is translated X%, and in another language Y%. And the more those files move back and forward, the more problems are introduced. Moving on, again, staying on the same theme with files. Of course, there are multiple file formats, multiple localization file formats. And these formats come in many flavors and many syntaxes, basically based on the language framework that is used. So in order to have communication between the application and the TMS, this middle part is needed, the one called parsers and integrations, where the file or some content comes from the application, is being parsed following specific rules that the specific file or integration has, and is fed to the TMS. So the problems that are there is that, okay, multiple language frameworks, multiple syntaxes, there are many moving parts here. And the cases that we have identified is, okay, either the file format is totally supported by the parser, where all syntax and all metadata that are contained in the file format can move back and forward to the translation management system. These cases here are the HTML, JSON, and PO cases. But even in those cases, there are problems because those file formats are consistent between them. So in one case, you might have the ability to define some context or some tags, like you have for PO, but for HTML, you can't do that. Also, the way you define variables in one and placeholders in one file format is quite different from the other. And then we have the other case, like the one displayed up here as the iOS case, where the parser cannot transfer the whole context that is available in the file format to the TMS, because many reasons. One example that I have in mind is that iOS made a change some time ago where they started supporting a different way to define, I don't recall the exact details, to define plurals or something else. And this broke the functionality up to that point. So in that case, the TMS version of that file doesn't hold all the information that is available for the translators and the localization team to do their job at their best. And this results in subpar results that are fed back. And there is a third case that, again, for various reasons, there is no parser available, or the application cannot communicate with the TMS. And those cases either are a blocker, where you can't do anything, or additional work is needed from the engineers or from the TMS in order to get this content, feed it to the TMS, and get localization back. Okay, this is what is displayed here. What is not displayed is that, as we all know in modern development, there are cases where a single application might require more than one file format, which is a hybrid model. This is the case in more than one applications, where you have certain aspects of the application be served by the front end, for example, a React Native, and other parts of the application, other pages, be served from the backend. And those two contents have a different syntax and a different set of metadata. So all this information ends up in the TMS without the ability to relate the two, because they both support different things. So this is the sum of the problem with the current localization flow. And if I was to make a quick overview of this, is that, okay, although we talk and act continuous in all other aspects of the development, localization is not there yet. And in order to make it there, we either need to costly bypass it or work around it by scripts. And the second takeaway is that there is a variety of formats and syntaxes that make consistency a bigger problem. Especially, this is true, especially as the effort for localization grows across the company, where you have more than one product to localize, and you need to localize your help center as well, your knowledge base. emails, the marketing website. Because of these changes in syntax and how metadata is transferred, there is a big chance of introducing inconsistencies on that level. Okay, and having defined the problem, this was what we wanted to work on. How can we make these interactions as frictionless as possible? How can we support a modern workflow over continuous integration, continuous delivery? And that's how we ended up with Transifex Native. And Transifex Native is our proposal to the frictionless localization. And it's a cloud-based localization stack that is more than a single solution. There are 3 solutions actually in there that all contribute on their side on making this as frictionless as possible. Our focus, as we have seen already with Transifex Native, is on supporting CI/CD flows in a better way and getting away with syntax and file misbehaviors when parsed. So let's see how we managed to do that. Okay, on this, this is a representative abstract graph of all the parts that Transifex Native interacts with and is a part of. Some of you might have seen it already in our documentation, and it's in our documentation as well. But let's start seeing what are the parts of Transifex Native. So Transifex Native first part is a language framework SDK, which is installed in your code, in the application code, and its work is to mark content for localization using a single syntax, an ICU syntax. And this means that each engineer working on the code will be marking translatable content using the Transifex Native SDK syntax. And also what this SDK provides is the ability to mark additional metadata, either manually or automated, supported by the framework, by the SDK on its own. So after this step is done, content is pushed to Transifex for localization. Again, I'm saying content, not files, because this is what actually happens. Content is sent in batches and not files to Transifex. And as content is sent, it is appended to a resource, I'm air quoting in case you don't see, in Transifex that holds all the similar native content in it. Sending the content in batches means that more than one person can send content simultaneously, and that's why we can see multiple lines up here in the graph. A not so obvious benefit that this approach has is that your engineers control when localization starts. There is no need for a single localization file to be updated with content. Engineers can send content for localization whenever they're ready. There is no need for coordination and syncing between engineers to say, okay, I have these strings, how can I merge them with your part, or how can I make sure that there are no conflicts on your case, or that no strings will be deleted because the file is, anyway, getting a bit technical, sorry for that. And finally, one final part of Transifex Native is the content delivery service, which is responsible for storing all content and serving it directly to your application. This server is independent for Transifex TMS and is serving the latest translations when there is a request. So this server, new localized content is periodically updated from Transifex TMS as it is made available. When we're talking about periodically, we're meaning at worst case, the moment that we have seen so far is a few hours. So every few hours, the content delivery service is pinging TMS for new translations, and as they are available, they are transferred to the content delivery service and are available for your application. One hidden thing that is not that obvious here is that the engineer works starts and stop in code. There are no other needs, nothing else needed from the engineer in this flow. So, as you see from this line down here, engineers can update the application directly without having to wait for localization to be ready, or a hint or a ping from a person managing localization to do stuff and merge a file or whatever. This is independent from the engineer work. So all in all, this is what native is. And I will summarize just the benefits to get there. I think I've covered enough this aspect of Transifex Native benefits that have to do with CI/CD and how the engineer works. So one thing that I haven't said already is that since the SDK follows a single syntax, which is ICU, every framework that there is a native SDK for will follow the same syntax, and that is consistent. With all the benefits that has to do with the developer, meaning there is no learning curve, nothing new to do, nothing that is not supported, which was supported on the other language framework, etc., etc. The aspect that we haven't covered, but is like a side effect of native, is the central content management. So since we send content in batches, that means that Transifex Native is able to manage duplicate content between applications, not only on the same application, but between applications too. And Transifex Native can handle how this content should be merged in a single string for a case or not. Another thing is that we achieve increased consistency because of the ICU syntax across application. That has a direct benefit for the localization team doing the translation, not having to see different metadata or different placeholders, but it also has to do with how Transifex manages that content for other tasks like fill-ups. So fill-ups will be consistent across applications, having nothing to do with how you mark your variables or placeholders, etc., etc. And last but not least is that people managing localization are the ones responsible for editing, adding, updating translations, and publishing them to the application. And this is a big relief for everybody involved in the localization flow. I will dare to say mostly engineers, because they don't have to go back and merge stuff and do works like this. So that's it for the content management. And one thing that is not visible, but it's hidden, and it's quite, I don't know the word anyway. It's very good for the future of Transifex Native, is that this stack that Transifex Native offers has some great potential for future extensions. For example, since the SDK is in the code already, we can draw some pretty nice analytics on what content do we feed localized at what pages of the application, which has a great benefit on getting the ROI of localization to your application, being able to communicate that with real data. Of course, this is one aspect that we're thinking of. There are many others. Okay, so I won't bother you anymore with technicalities. And I just want to state where we're currently at with Transifex Native. So right now, we're validating the solution over our application, Transifex web application. And we have built the first version of the full stack of Transifex Native, of what Transifex Native offers. And that means that we have an SDK for Django and Python. We have recently started developing an SDK for JavaScript for our front-end served pages. And we have made the shift to Transifex Native way of localization for the whole Transifex app. Additionally, we have communicated this change with our translation community, and we are in contact with them to get findings, tips, to be able to share them with you. And with that said, I want to pass it on to Dimitrios for an actual presentation. Thank you again for listening to me. Talk to you when we get into the QA.
Hello, it's great having you here today. Let me share my screen. Okay, you should be able to see my screen. Okay, so I'm going to showcase Transifex Native. Let's see it in action, how it works. More specifically, I'm going to show you how you can integrate Transifex Native in your project, and how the data, the content, the source strings get from your application to Transifex, and then how the translations come back to your application. Okay, so let's start with this very simple web page. This is based on a demo Django project. In case someone hasn't heard of this, Django is a web development framework, like Mike mentioned before. And this, what you see here, is a very simple page. And this is the HTML file that it depends on. So this is the code. It's a very basic Django template syntax. And you can see here, all these strings are right now static, so they're hard-coded. Okay, they're not marked for localization yet. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to integrate Transifex Native into this project. Okay, first thing, I'm going to install the Transifex Native package. Okay, and now going back to the Django project, I'm going to the settings file. Here, you'll see I have already added these two lines. There are sort of credentials. It's a token and a secret that Native requires in order to work. And you get this when you create a new native project on Transifex. So as soon as you create a project that is of type native, you get these two strings here, and they are associated with a specific project on Transifex and a specific resource. And they're used for getting the source phrases from the application to Transifex. So for pushing to Transifex, and then for pulling the translations back to the SDK and displaying them on your app. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark these strings for localization, and I do this with this syntax. This is a basic Django template syntax, the brace and the %sign. And this T here is a Transifex tag for localization with native. Okay, I'm going to load the package too. And okay, let's go and refresh the page. Okay, nothing changed, but already the page is served with by Transifex Native. Okay, the reason you didn't see any change is that okay, even if I change the language here and select German, there are no translations yet. Okay, so we just have the source strings, and the SDK falls back to showing the source strings when a translation is not available. So let's change that. Let's send the translations to Transifex. We have created a very convenient and simple management command here, Django management command. You call it with Transifex push, and this is going through all the folders inside the project, and is going to send them to Transifex. Okay, so it has found 4 translatable strings, and let's go to the editor and see if they are here. By the way, if you see here the URL, this is not the production Transifex, it's just a local instance of Transifex I'm running on my local machine on my laptop. So it's usually much slower than Transifex production. Okay, so bear with me. It's going to be a little bit slow, but it's necessary for the purposes of the demo. Okay, so here we have selected German, where we can see the 4 strings. And let's go and translate some of them. I'm going to use machine translation here. Okay. I'm going to leave that one. Okay, so I have translated 3 of the 4. Okay. Now, going back here to the website, and note here, I'm not restarting the server. I'm not doing anything to my web application. So the web app has been already deployed, and it's running. And now, if I refresh the page, we're going to see that the translation in German are going to be here. Okay, you see? The 3 of the 4 strings are translated in German. And this happened over the air. It's like, in a sort of magic way. I didn't do anything. I didn't run any command from my command line or from any other console or whatever. It just pulled the translations from a special service we call the content delivery service. The CDS. Anyway, let's use the acronym. Sorry, I forgot the full name. So if you see this phrase here, it's the one that is being shown in English, not in German, and the reason is that there's no translation for this yet, as we didn't translate it on the editor. And the SDK by default shows the source string. This is configurable. We're going to see later how you can change that. Okay, let's go back here now, and let's add a new string. Okay, and let's change an existing one. Okay. And now, so you got this hello there, which is brand new, and we changed this one. So sort of deleted, let's say, a previous one and added a new one. And now we're going to push again. By the way, this command that I'm running here, the push, it could be run by a developer on their local machine, or it could be taken care of in a CI/CD flow. Okay. Going back to the editor and refreshing. Now we are expecting to see the new string, hello there. And we are expecting to see the string that we changed, but we're also going to see the existing one, the previous one with that actually has a translation too, being there as well. So this is a new string, hello there, we just added. This is the previous string that we translated. It doesn't matter if it was translated or not, it's irrelevant. But what we see here is that the change, the modified string, you have both of them. Okay, so every string, when you push, gets appended. We do not replace like it's been done with if you have files, right? If you use the file approach with PO or whatever, it's only what the file contains, and everything else gets deleted. Here, by default, everything gets appended. So if there are two teams working on a different feature and they have different streams, they can both push, and the content will be there for both of them. They're not gonna lose the phrases. Okay, let's translate here. I don't know, it's taking a bit long. It's local, as I said before, so maybe something on my local machine. In any case, let's try and do this manually. Okay. I'm going to save. Save now. Okay, and let's go back here. Refreshing. Okay, the translation is not here yet, so it was saved on Transifex, but it hasn't reached the SDK yet. Let's wait for it. And by the way, this happens in within seconds right now for the demo. In real life, in production, it cannot scale, of course, if if it's that instant. The duration of we're using a caching system, and right now it's on 1 or 2 hours or something like that, and we're testing it to see how well it performs and how well it scales. But it's going to be a duration that makes sense for both the users and the website, and for performance and scaling. Okay, I think it was saved. Okay, let me check my console, please, here for a moment. Okay. Okay, I'm going to restart something. Just bear with me for a moment. Okay, it should be there now. Yes. Okay. Obviously, this is not something that would need to happen in production. It's something that that's about my machine here. And let me see. So if we refresh, okay, the German translation is here. Okay. Without restarting the server, I restarted something, an API, completely different thing there. So nothing having to do with the actual web application. Okay, now going back here, I'm going to show you an option you have that has to do with the empty translations. So as we saw before, if there is no translation for a string, it defaults to showing the source language. But I just enabled the pseudo translation mode, and you can see here these two strings. They're being shown with these special characters. And this is very convenient for debugging and QA testing. It's not typically used on production, but it's very convenient when you test things, because it makes the strings stand out, the strings that are not translated. And there are more options. You can add some special symbols to make the strings stand out more, or you can have extra characters for languages that typically have longer words, like German, for example. And you can combine those, or you can create your own missing policy, as we call it, and handle this case in a very custom way that you like. Okay, moving on. Going back to the HTML file, I'm going to add here a little bit more complex case, and I'm going to show you two things here. So we're going to use placeholders. This is an ICU variable placeholder, and I'm also going to show you how you can handle metadata with native. So you have context here, you have a character limit, a comment, and a couple of tags. Right, pushing again to Transifex. Okay, it found 6 strings now. One more. Let's go to the editor and see. It's taking a little bit long. Okay, sorry for this. Okay, as I'm okay. Let me find this. Okay, I got. I got a backup video here, actually, in case something like this happened, because it's live and sometimes things like this can happen. So let's see here. Okay. So I guess you can see my screen. If not, someone please tell me so. Okay, we got this. And okay, here we are. So it's the placeholders, as I said before, and the metadata. And now we're going to push to Transifex. And as this happens, okay, I'm going to start the service. Okay. And sorry for that again. So you push these strings online, and you can see them on the editor. And you can see the placeholder here, the variable. It's highlighted, and you machine translate. The placeholder is kept as it was, so it's not translated. It's because it needs to be there. That's a developer comment there. And note you can see the tags. You can see the character limit that we pushed from the code. You can see the context, and also you can see the occurrences. So you can see all the files and the line numbers here that this specific string was found in. Okay, now let's go back to the page and refresh it. And as you see here, the phrase is in German. The variable here, it was taken from the code, but there's a context here. This is very technical, but just to be clear, it's the Django context, and it's the value of the variable. It's big one cannot be. And the ICU renderer we have takes the value and places it inside the German string. And now we're going to try something different. We're going to save we're going to save an invalid string. So this, you can see that there is a brace here, an opening brace, but no closing brace. And this is not proper ICU syntax. You get a warning, you can see down there. But it originally, by default, it's an error. I just turned it into a warning here to show you something that even if this gets saved, and when you go to the website, we cannot render the actual string, the actual translation properly, because this is invalid syntax. So if the translator does this, which we protect you from with a check, but in any case, we fall back to the original string in English. It doesn't break, it doesn't throw a 500 server error. It's an extra failsafe we have developed. And this is actually also configurable. We call it an error policy, and you can create your own very, very easily and do custom things. Make it stand out or hide it completely, or I don't know, whatever you see fit. Okay, moving on next. Let's go to something quite different. I saw a question about this in the chat. It has to do with how to migrate existing content, an existing website to Transifex Native syntax. Because it is a lot of work, as I don't remember their name, sorry, who mentioned it in the chat. It is indeed a lot of work, and that's why we have developed a tool here that will make your life much, much easier. There is a Django command that migrates, automates the most part of the, actually all of the migration that you would otherwise do manually. And here you can see it's a Django command. It's manage.py transifex migrate, and you just run this on your code base. And we try to make this as clear and as transparent as possible, because allowing a tool to change your code is not something trivial. And we try to make sure that it's very clear what is going to happen, so that engineers can trust this tool. So it tells us that it found 9 files. Okay, and the first 2 have no translatable content, and the third one has 4 strings. Okay, and now you have many options. You can print the diff. You can see what will be changed. So you can see here that the script added this extra package for the native. For native, and this is Django. Any of you that are familiar with Django, you'll see that this is the trans or translate tag of Django. It's for simple cases. So this is the string, and this is the context. And now it has been converted to Transifex Native syntax using the T tag and the special notation we have for metadata. And this one is a bit more complex. It's a block trans case, which is a pluralized string. So this is the singular, and this is the plural. And here, this is the new syntax for Transifex Native. And if you see it closely, you'll see that this is an ICU string. So this is ICU syntax. That, as Mike said, this is what we support with Native. And it has successfully converted this and taking the variables and the filters and everything into account. And another case, which has, again, a block trans, which has variables here. It has filters. It has HTML portion inside the text. It has variables from the context, let's say, of Django. So again, it transforms this into a syntax for native. And in some cases that that we're not 100% sure that that there are, that the script is 100% confident that for the change it has made, it shows this here. That this is something that the developer or whoever is doing is running this command should take a better look. And you have many options. You can mark this inside the file and make it, proofread it later and so on. So in 95% of the cases, let's say, it's gonna just do it, the conversion, and in a few cases, when it feels that someone should take a better look, it says so inside the script. And we can accept the changes here. It says that they have been accepted. This was a dry run, so I'm just doing this, without changing the actual files in case someone wants to play with in the beginning. There are many different options for you to choose from. And let's see another one.
Sorry for the interruption, but let's try to stick to the timing, Dimitri.
Yeah, sure. Okay, one last, less than a minute. This is a Python script here. So it also takes care of the Python code that has translations here. So it's going to change the get text function calls to Transifex Native calls, and also the imports and all that. And that's it. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitri. We have 5 questions. So Dimitris has covered some of them, but let's walk through them anyway. So Ivan asks if in a large web app, it is merely impossible to go back, review and mark text for localization. How do you bring already existing content with Transifex Native? So Dimitris has showcased us parts of this answer. I don't know if Ivan, would you like to share something more or know something more? I'm unmuting you. Okay, now you can talk.
Oh, sorry.
Ivan, we can hear you. Yes.
If I may, I'd like to add here that we have used this tool, this command I showcased for doing the actual localization of Transifex to native, and it has been a tremendous help. It really sped things up, and it made us really, really confident for the changes we made on the code.
Okay, so we also have a related blog post about our process, and we can share that after our webinar. So if we're okay, we can proceed with the next question.
Yes, please proceed. My question was answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Dimitri, I believe you can go on with that. Are there any plans to add Java properties / bundles?
Okay, I'm not really sure what this means. Java properties is as far as I know, it's a file format that we also support in Transifex. I'm not sure, though. Maybe I would like a clarification if that's possible.
No, I can't find it out in our attendees, so I don't know if we can expand more on it. Okay, I'm closing this one too. And then we have Ivan again. Is native working for Python only? Does it support other languages?
Mm-hmm.
Dimitri, you can start with that. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. Right now it supports Python and Django on top of Python. And since we are using some localized parts in Transifex as well with JavaScript, we have already started building that as well to try it out. We plan to, okay, Mike, maybe you should talk about what we plan next.
Yeah, all in all, this effort is open source. So we are more than delighted to include more people into porting it to more frameworks. We do have a plan to make this as easy as possible, and we do plan to expand to other languages and other frameworks based on your needs and how you see native working for your cases. So we'll be gathering feedback and input from our customers to see what's the best direction where we can move to next. On top of that, we do have a plan to work closely with the open source community and cooperatively promote Transifex Native as a solution, as a standalone solution, even without using Transifex. So since we're just beginning working in that direction, we will have updates on other languages and other frameworks later on. So I don't have any answers today. I know that we are working closely about .NET, but there's nothing solid yet that we can talk about with an open source community member. So yeah, is that covered? Thank you. Okay, then we have this question from Chris. What happens when a translator makes an error? For example, a missing placeholder or unescaping quotes into a string.
Mm-hmm.
Dimitri,
Yeah, let me take that, Mike. So there are, as I showed, there are some translation checks that happen on the string when you try to save it. So there are going to be some specific checks that make sure that it is a valid translation, the one that you're trying to save. If someone turns that into warning, just like I did before, or disables, then the translation will be saved, of course, and it's going to be invalid. So the next fail-safe for us is to make sure that the website or the web application does not break, and instead we can by default we display the source string in the source language. I mean, and also you can configure that yourself and do something very custom that you'd like to do. And maybe I don't know, inform someone or anything. You can automate. You can practically do anything there. It's very easy to do.
Chris, are you covered? Okay. Sorry?
It's all good.
Okay, thank you. Then we have one last question from Carmen. I'm not sure I understand why do you not replace a string that has been updated? Again, Dimitri, you can start and I can jump in.
Mike, I think this is more of a product question, if you don't mind. And if I say something, I would like to add, I can do that.
Okay. So for the time being, one thing that you might not haven't noticed yet is that we don't support keys on strings. So that means that in order to create a key, we need to extrapolate that using the source string and any context that is on that string. So to support the cases where multiple people contribute for localization using Transifex Native, we chose not to remove a string that we don't find in the source code in case there is an in-between state. But our plans are to support both the key information on the string, so that a key has a specific a string has a specific key, as well as a purge functionality. That's where Dimitris can expand more. When we check the code, find any strings that are not used anywhere in the code, and give the option to remove them. Is that correct, Dimitri?
The latter, this is not something we have implemented yet. You mean about our plans, right, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah. What we already have in place is when you run the transifex push command, you can also add the purge option, which will do a replace. So it will only upload the strings that that are currently inside the code. I didn't showcase that, but it's just an option. It's you just write purge and it does that.
Carmen, are you covered? Okay, thank you. So these were all the questions that we had. We do have other questions that people have asked us on Native. We're going to share them in what follows, the email the follow-up of this webinar. And now I will pass it on to Panagiotis for closing this session. Thank you all from my side.
Thank you too.
Everyone, as Mike mentioned, you will shortly receive an email with this recording and other supporting material. See you, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.